Before potato chips became the easiest thing in the world to tear open during a football game, they were a luxury snack, a restaurant side dish, a battlefield of business myths, and one of the strangest little inventions in American food history. Because if you think about it for even 2 seconds, a potato chip is ridiculous. It is a vegetable sliced so thin it almost stops being food, fried until it becomes loud, salted until your hand keeps going back into the bag, and then sold in a package filled with so much air that half the experience is emotional betrayal. And yet, Americans love them. We eat them at cookouts, school lunches, road trips, diners, gas stations, tailgates, hotel rooms, midnight kitchens, and parties where nobody knows who brought the bowl, but everyone keeps standing next to it. Potato chips are one of those foods that feel like they have always existed, but their history is full of class, technology, marketing, urban legends, industrial science, and one very important question. Who looked at a potato and decided the best version of it was basically a salty, edible playing card? To understand that, we have to go back before the potato chip, to the potato itself. Potatoes are native to the Andes in South America, where indigenous people were growing them thousands of years before Europeans ever saw one. When Spanish explorers brought potatoes back to Europe in the 1500s, a lot of Europeans did not trust them at first. They grew underground, they looked strange, and people connected them with poverty, disease, and even superstition. But potatoes had one powerful advantage. They were practical. They could grow in rough soil, feed a lot of people, and survive in climates where other crops struggled. Over time, the potato became one of the most important foods in Europe, especially for the working poor. By the time Europeans brought potato farming traditions to North America, the potato was already on its way to becoming one of the most useful foods in the world. But a potato chip is not just a potato. It is a potato transformed by thin slicing, hot fat, salt, and crunch. And that brings us to the most famous story in potato chip history, which may also be one of the most suspicious. The legend says that in 1853, at Moon's Lake House in Saratoga Springs, New York, a wealthy customer complained that his fried potatoes were too thick. The chef, often identified as George Crum, supposedly got annoyed, sliced the potatoes paper thin, fried them until they were crisp, and sent them out as a joke. But instead of being angry, the customer loved them. The Saratoga chip was born. It is a great story. It has everything Americans love in a food origin myth: a demanding customer, an irritated cook, a rich resort town, an accidental invention, and a snack that becomes famous because someone was being petty in exactly the right way. The problem is that food history is rarely that clean. Thin fried potato recipes existed before 1853. Cookbooks in Britain and the United States had already described fried potato slices that were very close to what we would call chips. And George Crum himself did become connected with Saratoga chips, but the exact story of the angry customer seems to have grown over time. Some versions name the customer as Cornelius Vanderbilt, which sounds dramatic, but is probably more legend than fact. Still, George Crum matters. He was a real cook, a real figure in Saratoga food culture, and he helped make thin fried potatoes famous in one of the most fashionable resort towns in America. Saratoga Springs in the 1800s was not some quiet little town where people just happened to invent snack food. It was a destination for wealthy visitors who came for mineral springs, hotels, gambling, horse racing, and social life. Food served there could become fashionable because the people eating it had money and influence. So even if the exact invention story is blurry, the Saratoga chip became famous because it had the right crunch in the right place at the right time. At first, potato chips were not something you grabbed from a convenience store. They were often made fresh in restaurants, hotels, and local kitchens. They were served in paper cones, tins, barrels, or glass cases. They were delicate, salty, expensive, and local. In the late 1800s and early 1900s, small chip makers started appearing across the United States, especially in the Northeast and Midwest. Many of them were family businesses. Someone sliced potatoes by hand or with a simple machine, fried them in small batches, salted them, and sold them nearby. But there was a problem. Potato chips go stale fast. They absorb moisture, lose their crunch, and become sad little potato leaves if they are not protected. Early packaging was not great. Chips might be sold in barrels or tins where customers scooped them out, which sounds charming until you remember that everybody's hands, dust, and air were also part of the business model. The potato chip needed a better container before it could become a national obsession. One of the key breakthroughs came from packaging, especially wax paper bags. In the 1920s, Laura Scudder, a California businesswoman and former nurse, helped popularize sealing chips in wax paper bags to keep them fresh. The story often goes that her workers ironed the bags closed by hand. That detail alone tells you how much snack history depends on people doing repetitive, unglamorous work so the rest of us can later open a bag and say, "Why is this already half gone?" Better packaging changed everything. It allowed chips to travel farther, stay fresher, and become a product people could buy ahead of time instead of eating only when freshly fried. At the same time, machinery changed the chip itself. Hand slicing gave way to mechanical slicers. Small kettles gave way to larger fryers. Local routes grew into regional distribution systems. And then came the traveling salesman of snack history. One of the most important was Herman Lay. In the 1930s, Lay sold potato chips from the trunk of his car in the American South. He understood something that sounds obvious now but was powerful then. Potato chips were not just food, they were a root business. You needed production, packaging, delivery, store placement, and constant freshness. A stale chip was not just bad food, it was bad marketing. Lay built a distribution network, bought a chip company, expanded aggressively, and eventually helped turn Lay's into one of the biggest snack brands in America. Later, Lay's merged with Frito, creating Frito-Lay, a snack empire that would become part of PepsiCo. That corporate family matters because potato chips eventually became tied to the larger world of American packaged food, soft drinks, supermarkets, advertising, sports, and convenience culture. The chip bag was not alone anymore. It had a soda next to it, a dip beside it, a commercial during the game, and a spot at the end of the grocery aisle where hungry people make terrible but deeply understandable decisions. But the potato chip did not conquer America just because of business. It conquered America because it solved a feeling. Americans wanted food that was fast, portable, inexpensive, shareable, and fun. Chips fit the modern rhythm. They did not need a fork, a plate, a stove, or a plan. They made noise, which made them feel active. They were salty, which made people thirsty. They paired with sandwiches, burgers, hot dogs, beer, soda, and basically every food served on a paper plate. During the 20th century, as more Americans bought cars, watched television, filled lunchboxes, hosted backyard barbecues, and shopped in supermarkets, the potato chip was perfectly positioned. It was casual food for a casualizing country. But for a long time, potato chips were mostly plain and salted. That changed when flavoring technology turned the chip into a tiny billboard for taste. Barbecue chips, sour cream and onion, salt and vinegar, cheddar, ranch, jalapeno, honey mustard, dill pickle, and endless limited editions turned chips from one snack into an entire aisle of personalities. In America, barbecue chips became especially important because they connected packaged snack food to the smoky, sweet, spicy image of regional cooking, even if the chip itself had never been within 5 miles of a pit. Flavor dust is one of the great magic tricks of modern food. It takes powders, oils, acids, sugars, salt, and artificial or natural flavors, and convinces your brain that a thin piece of fried potato has somehow become a backyard barbecue, a loaded baked potato, or a bowl of French onion dip. And speaking of dip, Chips changed party food. In the 1950s, as television, suburban entertaining, and convenience foods exploded, chips and dip became a national ritual. One famous example was California dip, made with sour cream and onion soup mix. It was easy, creamy, salty, and exactly the kind of mid-century shortcut that made people feel like they were hosting without actually cooking very much. Potato chips were no longer just a side. They were the thing everyone gathered around while pretending they were not going to ruin dinner. Then came one of the strangest chapters in chip history, Pringles. Pringles were introduced in the late 1960s, and they were designed to solve problems that regular chips had never been polite enough to fix. Regular chips broke. They were greasy, they were uneven. They came in bags with too much empty space. Pringles were stacked in a tube like someone decided potato chips needed military discipline. Technically, Pringles are not simply sliced potatoes. They are made from a potato-based dough formed into a uniform saddle shape, fried, seasoned, and stacked. That shape is called a hyperbolic paraboloid, which sounds less like a snack and more like something your math teacher would use to ruin a Friday. But it worked. The shape helped them stack, gave them strength, and made them instantly recognizable. Pringles also led to legal and marketing debates about what counts as a potato chip, because once humans invent something delicious, the next step is always arguing about definitions. Meanwhile, traditional chips kept evolving too. Kettle-cooked chips became popular because they felt more rustic, thicker, crunchier, and more artisanal, even when made by large companies. Reduced-fat chips, baked chips, low-sodium chips, organic chips, avocado oil chips, and sweet potato chips all followed the same American pattern. We take a food famous for indulgence, then create versions that let us feel slightly better about eating the same basic thing. The potato chip became a mirror for every food anxiety of its era. Too greasy? Make it baked. Too processed? Make it kettle-cooked. Too boring? Add extreme flavor. Too childish? Put sea salt on the label. Too cheap-looking? Use matte packaging and mention the farm. But underneath all of that, the basic appeal never changed. Thin potato, hot oil, salt, crunch. One reason chips are so hard to stop eating is texture. Crunch is deeply satisfying. It gives instant feedback. Your ears hear the bite, your mouth feels the shatter, and your brain gets a little reward before you even swallow. Salt boosts flavor and keeps you reaching. Fat carries flavor and gives richness. Many chip seasonings also hit sweet, sour, spicy, and umami notes at the same time, which means every bite feels simple, but is actually doing a lot of work. The phrase, "bet you can't eat just one," was not just advertising. It was practically a dare from food science. Potato chips also became part of American identity because they fit so many social situations. At a lunch counter, they sat beside a sandwich. At a barbecue, they filled a bowl next to burgers. At a Super Bowl party, they became a delivery system for dip. On a road trip, they were one of the few foods that could survive in a gas station bag without asking questions. In school lunches, the little bag of chips became a trade item, a status symbol, and sometimes the best part of the meal. Chips are casual, but they are not invisible. Everyone has opinions. Ridges or no ridges, kettle or classic, barbecue or sour cream and onion, bag or tube, crushed at the bottom or folded into a sandwich. Yes, putting chips inside a sandwich deserves its own chapter in American food history. It adds crunch, salt, and the tiny thrill of doing something your parents probably told you not to do. But potato chips also have a darker side, because they are tied to the industrial food system. They depend on large-scale potato farming, frying oils, salt, packaging, transport, and aggressive marketing. The perfect chip potato is not just any potato. Companies care about size, sugar content, moisture, color, storage behavior, and how the potato fries. Too much sugar can make chips brown too quickly. Too much moisture can affect texture. Entire supply chains exist so a snack can look effortless. And then there is the bag. Chip bags are designed to protect against light, air, and moisture, but they also create waste that is difficult to recycle. So the potato chip is both a masterpiece of convenience and a symbol of the costs behind convenience. It is fun, but it is not simple. It is cheap at the shelf, but built on a huge industrial machine. It feels spontaneous, but almost every part of it has been engineered. Even the air in the bag has a purpose. It is usually nitrogen, used to protect the chips from oxygen and crushing. So yes, the bag looks like it is half empty, but part of that emptiness is doing a job. Emotionally, however, it still feels like betrayal, and I stand with the people on that. The weirdest thing about potato chips may be that they began as something special and became something invisible. A crisp, fried potato slice once felt fancy enough for resort dining. Then it became local snack food. Then a packaged grocery item. Then a national brand. Then a global product. Today, potato chips are everywhere, and because they are everywhere, we forget how strange they are. We forget the Saratoga legends, the wax paper bags, the root salesmen, the flavor laboratories, the supermarket battles, the party dips, the tubes, the ridges, the sports ads, and the farms behind every handful. We treat chips like background noise, but they are actually one of the loudest foods in American history, literally and culturally. They tell a story about how Americans eat when they are busy, how companies build habits, how technology changes texture, how packaging changes geography, and how a simple vegetable can become a multi-billion-dollar craving. So the next time you open a bag of potato chips, listen to that first crunch. That sound carries more history than it should. It carries the Andes, European suspicion, Saratoga resorts, restaurant kitchens, wax paper bags, car trunk sales routes, supermarket shelves, football parties, flavor dust, and the eternal human weakness for salt and crunch. The potato chip is not just a snack. It is proof that America can take something humble, fry it thin, build an industry around it, argue about its origin story, cover it in barbecue powder, and still act surprised when the whole bag disappears.